Before the Allied armies fully secured their foothold in Normandy, before the beaches were firmly linked, and before armored divisions began their push inland, there was a quieter and far more uncertain struggle unfolding in the dark fields and hedgerows of France. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, thousands of American paratroopers descended from the night sky into a landscape they could barely see, scattered across unfamiliar terrain, surrounded by an enemy they believed they understood. They expected resistance. They expected confusion. What many of them did not expect was to encounter a very different kind of German soldier, one who would not retreat, who would counterattack aggressively, and who was driven by an ideological commitment that went beyond conventional military duty. When American airborne troops first met the Waffen-SS in Normandy, the encounter revealed that the campaign in France would be far more brutal than many had anticipated. The United States Army's airborne divisions were among the most rigorously trained formations in the American military. Units like the 101st Airborne Division had been built around speed, initiative, and decentralized action. Paratroopers were trained to operate behind enemy lines, often isolated, often outnumbered, and frequently without clear lines of communication. Their doctrine emphasized flexibility. Small groups of determined men were expected to seize bridges, disrupt supply routes, and hold key terrain until reinforcements could arrive. Confidence in the individual soldier was central to airborne philosophy. By contrast, the Waffen-SS represented a different evolution within Germany's war machine. Distinct from the regular Wehrmacht, these formations were built not only on military discipline, but on ideological loyalty to the Nazi regime. Divisions such as the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, deployed to Normandy in 1944, were composed largely of young soldiers raised under years of National Socialist indoctrination, led by experienced SS officers transferred from the Eastern Front. Their training emphasized aggression, cohesion, and unwavering resistance. Withdrawal was not a preferred option. Counterattack was. When American paratroopers landed across Normandy during Operation Overlord, their immediate objectives were tactical: secure causeways, capture crossroads, disrupt German reinforcements moving toward the beaches. The landings themselves were chaotic. Many units were scattered miles from their intended drop zones. Equipment was lost. Officers were separated from their commands. In those first hours, small groups of paratroopers improvised, assembling ad hoc defensive positions and probing cautiously through hedgerow country that limited visibility to mere yards. It was in this fragmented environment, particularly in the days following the initial landings near areas such as Carentan and the approaches to the Cotentin Peninsula, that airborne elements began encountering formations of the Waffen-SS, moving to contain the Allied lodgment. The contrast became immediately apparent. Unlike some earlier engagements in North Africa or Italy, where German withdrawals could be tactical and measured, these SS units often responded with sharp, determined counterattacks. Paratroopers who had expected disorganized resistance instead faced coordinated assaults, supported by armor and artillery. The hedgerows of Normandy amplified the intensity of these encounters. Thick earthen embankments lined with dense vegetation created natural fortifications. Engagements occurred at short range, frequently with limited warning. In such conditions, initiative and discipline were tested constantly. American airborne troops, trained for aggressive, small unit maneuver, found themselves in deadly close quarters fighting against opponents equally committed to holding ground. Neither side possessed overwhelming numerical superiority in many of these localized clashes. What mattered was resolve, communication, and the ability to adapt. For many American soldiers, this first sustained contact with Waffen SS formations reshaped their perception of the enemy in France. The German army they had studied in training manuals was professional and formidable. The SS formations they now faced added an additional layer of intensity. Reports circulated quickly through airborne ranks describing fierce resistance and repeated counterattacks. The psychological dimension of the campaign shifted. Normandy would not be a simple breakout following the success at the beaches. It would be a grinding contest through enclosed terrain against an opponent unwilling to concede ground easily. Yet the encounter also revealed something else. The decentralized doctrine of the airborne proved resilient under pressure. Small American units, cut off and surrounded in the early days, demonstrated the ability to reorganize and hold key positions long enough for larger forces to consolidate. In battles around Carentan, for example, airborne troops endured determined SS assaults, but ultimately maintained control of critical junctions that allowed the Utah and Omaha beachheads to link. Tactical flexibility countered ideological rigidity. This first meeting between American paratroopers and the Waffen-SS did not decide the Normandy campaign in a single dramatic moment. There was no singular clash that ended the struggle overnight. Instead, the impact accumulated over days of brutal, localized fighting. It clarified the character of the campaign ahead. Allied forces would not be advancing against a collapsing defense. They would be pushing through a region defended by units prepared for sustained resistance. In military history, first encounters often strip away assumptions. They replace theory with reality. For American airborne troops in Normandy, the first confrontation with Waffen SS formations revealed both the dangers and the demands of the campaign they had entered. It confirmed that victory in France would require not only numerical superiority and industrial power, but endurance at the smallest tactical levels. In fields bounded by hedgerows, in villages contested house by house, and in moments when isolated squads faced determined counterattacks. The meeting of these two forces in June 1944 was more than a clash of uniforms. It was a collision of doctrines, decentralized initiative against centralized ideological resolve. It was a test of preparation against indoctrination. And in the confined landscapes of Normandy, that test would shape the tempo of operations long before armored columns began their breakout toward Paris. Long before the war in Europe ended, long before Allied troops crossed the Rhine, the lessons of that first encounter had already taken hold. Normandy would not yield easily, but in adapting to what they faced, American airborne forces proved that flexibility and cohesion could withstand even the most determined opposition. In that realization, born in scattered fields and fortified hedgerows, the broader character of the campaign was defined.